Okay, looks like we're kind of leveling off on people logging in. So we will get started. Again, thank you for joining us. This is our ProLinkHFA webinar. Today we're going to be covering checklist functionality in ProLinkHFA. So to start us off, I'm going to cover some general information as I always do. We'll then head into the content for today. Some of the main items that we're going to cover are adding checklists manually, creating and adding checklist templates, checklist reporting and data views, and then checklists and workflows. So quite a bit of how to use checklists and incorporate them into your business process that we'll be covering today. I'm Brie Cruder. I'm the Executive VP for ProLink. I help our clients in their customer success journey with us, and Sara Surprenant is our customer success rep and one of our lead trainers. Many of you have probably seen Sara and worked with her many times before. So thank you, Sara, for joining us today. She will be providing our live demo. Going over just our general information before I hand it off to Sara. So for anyone new to our webinar series that's tuned in today, we have been hosting a webinar for a few years now, it seems, virtually. And the objective of these sessions is to host and discuss kind of industry trends, industry concerns, and pair them with technology support as much as we can. So a lot of times you'll see live demonstrations pretty much every time of our product suite as we try to address those different areas of concern. Sometimes we have more technical topics, like today's topic is going straight into demos and how to use checklists within ProLinkHFA to meet those different objectives you may have in your business process and make that easier and more kind of automated for you. Other times we talk more subjectively on topics like what does a software implementation require, or how do we get adoption and business processes to move towards using more technology to support those needs. So we usually establish a kind of theme per quarter that we trend along with the webinar topics we choose. So in the first part of the year, we did cover more adoption and implementation related topics. And then we moved into more reporting and financials. And now we are focused more on compliance and reporting around compliance. So that is what our focus has been. One thing to just preface with the subject we have for today, checklists. Regardless of the examples Sara might have prepared for today, it can be used and implemented across any department, any stage of the deal life cycle. So certainly a dynamic tool to use in your business process. If you see compliance examples today, just know that we have plenty of options and ideas around the development phase of a project and using checklists for that as well. So typically these sessions have a business presenter, which is either a guest if we're lucky enough to have an opportunity to invite a guest on with us, or it's a ProLinker who's fulfilling that business presentation. And then we have our technical presenter like Sara is today. This occurs the first Wednesday of each month. And typically we last about 45 minutes in these demos or in these webinars. And our audience are housing agencies nationally. So we have a lot of our current clients who log in to just kind of, I think, see what we're up to. A lot of times we'll share some of our newer software releases on these webinars. And it's also a great refresher of the things that might already exist that you might just want to be refreshed on. So great opportunity for our existing clients to do that, and for those who may not be clients to learn more about what we have in our offerings. So definitely a mix. This is our last ProLinkHFA webinar for 2023, which is wild to think about, but next month, November, is our ProLink Tech Live, our ProLink Technology Live conference. It's our user conference we host every year, and it's scheduled for November 7th and 8th. We open that up to anybody who wants to attend. So obviously, the primary audience in that conference are existing ProLinkHFA users. But if you are not, and you would like to see what a user group conference and training event looks like from ProLink, you're welcome to register and attend those sessions. So I will have more to share towards the end of today's webinar on that. And I look forward to seeing you there. So we're going to have that next month and replace kind of a replacement of our normal webinar. December is a low month for webinar attendance, so we're taking that month off. January, we plan and tee up our series for 2024. So from February 2024 through October, you will have our monthly webinar kick up again. So with this being our last one, please provide any comments or ideas or feedback if you've been a regular attendee on time, just even the basic things like if this is a convenient time for you to attend these webinars, content, things you're hoping that we'll cover, anything that might help us improve this for next year. I would obviously love to hear from you. So please feel free to do that either in the chat or Q&A section on Zoom. We would love to hear from you. Okay, so with that, just covering who ProLink is quickly. Many of you already are familiar with us or work with us today, but we are a affordable housing technology provider. We've been in the affordable industry for pretty much most of our existence since the early 2000s, since the early part of 2000. And we serve the state and local housing agencies. That's kind of the first area of the industry that we started to support with their portfolio management systems on their multifamily side, then kind of started working more with our tax credit syndicators and investors. So we built a portfolio management system for LIHTC syndicators and investors, and we continue to support them today. We work with 5 of those, and then developers is an audience. Developers, property managers, owner agents is kind of something that's evolved over time through the work that we've done with our agencies, using Procorum as that collaboration portal to work with agencies has just led us into the opportunity to serve more of those groups as well. And our work really, what we try our hardest to do, our goal is to build systems that really support our clients through the entire deal life cycle, from that origination conceptual phase all the way through asset management and compliance. We also do support the Homeowner Assistance Fund with a separate application there. So we have many different kind of software applications at our disposal that support our clients. Our team is made up, of course, of technologists. We're a software company, but many of which who have been with us for quite a long time and are experts in the affordable industry are familiar with the complexity there and the nuances and differences kind of required by agency. There's differences across each state, but then also just compared to market rate, all the many differences in technology needs with reporting to the many regulatory bodies and HUD and many other factors that we need to consider as your technology provider. Covering just a few more details on ProLink, specifically looking at our client base. So we have a number of public sector clients, 17 housing, state housing finance agencies. We also support 2 supportive services agencies. And then again, we support 5 syndicator investor lender groups. So we have very strong partnerships with NCSHA. I hope to see many of you in Boston in just a couple of weeks here. It's a beautiful time of year to be in Boston. So we'll be there for the NCSHA conference. We're also part of NAMA, which is the standard XML group that it's kind of a committee that helps to bubble up changes that are needed between the technology that supports the agencies and then the property management software out there to automate that data feed of tenant events and compliance data coming from that property management software. So we help to kind of lobby for the changes needed there and bring up issues on our side that we see as requirements as regulatory and reporting needs change. We work with that group to try to get those property management tools to make similar adjustments in what they have available in their NAMA XML export that we use to feed into ProLinkHFA for that data. So that's another big area and active partnership that we work on regularly. And then, as I mentioned before, HFA webinar is something we are very passionate about and host regularly monthly. We started a ProQuorum webinar this year, early part of the summer. Previously, we were calling that our developer webinar, but we quickly kind of adjusted to address any users of ProQuorum because there's quite a vast audience there and need for a similar series to this in using ProQuorum. So definitely something, if you're an existing client of ours, check out the recordings we have for this year's webinars that we've done. It can be great material for like onboarding new partners or users of ProQuorum into your agency account of ProQuorum. It's just a lot of how-to, troubleshooting regular needs or questions that might come up on ProQuorum. And then also talking about general procedures that agencies will administer on ProQuorum. So definitely something to check out, and we will continue that series in February along with HFA. We have our quarterly training that we offer through our user group. So that's something that we offer regularly, just additional trainings throughout the year to support our users. We did a tenant event training for compliance in, I think that was February this year. Sara hosted that one for our tenant event upload into ProQuorum and training your partners and being able to do that successfully. So that was in February. We also did a HUD export, HUD reporting training in July. So we will continue to offer alongside our ProLink Tech Live conference, our user conference, pretty much on a quarterly schedule. We try to offer at least one session. And then finally, you guys are aware, some of you, we are supported by Amazon Web Services. So that's the security and hosting that we offer on the cloud. A lot of those services are kind of intertwined with the software that we provide. And DocuSign is another outside technology provider that we have integrated with specifically on the Homeowner Assistance Fund application, and certainly something that could be an opportunity later for ProLinkHFA. Here's just a quick picture from a visual perspective of the agencies that we work with for those who are interested in that. And thank you very much for being our clients, to those who are tuned in today. And then this is close to my last slide here, just another bird's eye view for those who may be new to your agency. This is also a good venue to kind of get to know ProLinkHFA if you are new or if you are outside of our client base. This is kind of a bird's eye view of how our products work together and who they serve. So we have ProLinkHFA at the top. And that is our database, our back office database that our agencies are logging into. It's really that holy grail of data, that final source of record for your agency. And then on the front and right, I guess below that, we have ProQuorum, and ProQuorum represents that collaboration portal where you're going to have all different kinds of constituents in the industry logging in. You're going to have your developers logging in to submit applications. You have contractors involved in the construction phase and requesting draws in Budget Pro, which is an app built into ProQuorum. You have property managers who are managing compliance and providing that reporting through our tenant event portal. So many different use cases of ProQuorum alongside plenty of other use cases that are not mentioned on this slide. It's kind of that relationship room at the work center level per property, per deal that we offer. And then that is the source that ProLinkHFA uses to pull that information in and then report back out to those parties as well. And then, of course, we have Smart Docs, which is an Excel and Word add-in tool that also helps with that collection and translation of data between parties, and automates that so we don't have as much manual entry. This last slide is just a picture highlighting the main modules that are included in ProLinkHFA. So We provide ProLinkHFA as an off-the-shelf product. So you kind of get all of these things included, and they work together to build that holistic tool from that beginning through end phase of these deals. So you have your you have your multifamily development and bond financing module there in the orange at the bottom, kind of going counterclockwise then to asset management and compliance. We also have a single family development module as well. And on the left, you can see a few other areas that we specifically support clients with. Supportive services, you saw we have a couple supportive services clients. REO, and then Budget Pro is an application that we're hoping to onboard with other states over the next few years. It's certainly an opportunity, but started with one agency that we worked with. And that is the construction draw and budget requisition tool. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Sara to join us for checklists and covering our live demonstration. Sara, I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, I'm going to steal the screen from you now.
Thank you.
Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. I'm not sure where everybody is. Can you see my screen okay, Bree?
Yes.
Okay. So today I'm going to go over some of our checklist functionality in ProLinkHFA. We do have that in a few other applications as well. I'm not sure if any of your agencies use this. If not, we're going to give you a live example of a situation where it might be handy based on some of the challenges we've had over the past couple of months. And I'm talking about the HUD uploads and things like that. We're going to talk about adding checklists manually, and then we're going to go through how you can create templates to add checklists to specific deals or properties at any given time during your life cycle, and then how you can set up workflows to automatically add those checklists, and then track who has completed the checklist requirements. I think that checklists are kind of one of those things everybody uses in our day-to-day lives. I have an example. I have like this checklist that I use for my spring cleaning, which you probably can't see. It's not checked, but I assure you that I did everything when I did my spring cleaning. But I'll put these checklists up in my rooms to make sure that I have all these things done. So, okay, I can feel like I've accomplished something. And when it comes to ProLinkHFA, when you have so many people that have input in various stages of what you're doing, having just a checklist to make sure that they are making sure this item's checked off, this has been filled out, this email has been sent, etc., it can make your life a little bit easier as far as accountability and making sure everybody's on the same page when you know what needs to get done and when that needs to be completed by. So everyone knows a checklist is a series of items that you check off, thus checklist. And in ProLinkHFA, most of our modules have checklist functionality attached to them, whether that's your dev deals or TC deals, portfolio properties, supportive services. I believe loans also currently has the checklist functionality. And if anybody's been familiar with our application, I'm going to kind of breeze through some of the top level and how-tos because this is going to be available for you at a later date. I just want to kind of call out the differences between a checklist template and ad hoc checklist and why some of these screens might look a little different depending on if you're accessing it from like admin as a template or you're actually utilizing it as a checklist that's been added to one of your records in the system. When we talk about required fields in ProLink, anyone who has spent any time with our application at all is very well aware of what we call our required fields. And these fields are usually indicated by a red asterisk. Conditionally required fields are with a blue asterisk. But if you see a red asterisk at any point on a screen, that's your key that this has to be filled out in order to save a record successfully. And if you do not have that required field filled out and you save, you're going to get a validation error that tells you you have to have this field to save it. So for our checklist and our checklist templates, it's super easy because the only thing that we have required is a title on those screens. And you can see I have this called out checklist template. This is something that admins can create that can be used across the application and associated automatically with the workflow or manually added via the checklist template. We're going to go through a little bit of that with a live demo in our system. And then if you just have like one particular record that has a specific checklist for something, you can just add that on the fly. And when you create a specific ad hoc checklist for one record, that's not going to be something that you can use our functionality with the templates, checklist, and workflow to associate that to all records. It's going to be a per record checklist. It's going to be special. It's going to be unique. The sort order kind of shows where this falls in our list screens. So at what area that or what number that's going to be displayed. And then if you have more than one checklist on a deal or a property, the sort order is going to show what order that displays in as well. You can select these as active or inactive, and you can track those by what's active, what's not. If you have a previous checklist, like for example, annual review checklist 2022, if you don't want to use that anymore, you can mark that as inactive. You can retain that checklist in the system, but when it comes to adding a template checklist to a property or deal, that won't be available for you to select. And then you can put your checklist descriptions in the checklist description box for all your checklists. As you know, we have lots of descriptions, comments, and note fields throughout the application. So those are just the basics, your top level fields when you want to create a checklist template. And I had animations. I didn't get to show them to you. That's sad. But this will be, we will post this to the user group work center so you have the visual of our PowerPoint if you want to go back and review some of these items. So once you have your checklist, the second thing that you want to add is have the checklist items, because you just can't have a rogue checklist hanging out there. You have to add things that you want to have completed by a certain date. And the way that we sort these, if there is no sort order, they're just going to be by name alphabetically. But if you do have a sort order, there's an order where it goes by sort order, and then it will go alphabetically. Like in this example, we have sort 1, the B comes first, and then the F. So when you're talking about your checklist items, the fields are going to be on the item as the checklist item name. And that's kind of probably going to be the instruction of like, hey, whoever is filling out this checklist, this is the step you need to take. This is your action. This is what you're going to be doing. And when you first populate this on a template, you may or may not have a receive date on there. But the most important fields on a checklist item, as far as tracking, accountability, and being able to generate workflows for overdue items, is going to be your completed date, your waive date, and your due date. Your due date is something that can be manually updated if you add a checklist on the fly, or you can have, and we'll cover this in a later slide, how many days after this checklist is added to a record do you want this to be completed by someone? And then once that due date has passed, you can view those items in a data view to see what's overdue based on the current date, or you can have a workflow send out a notification to someone to let them know that checklist hasn't been completed, or even a specific checklist item hasn't been completed or waived. So sometimes you might have items that aren't applicable to a specific scenario, and that's why you have the option to do waived or completed. And waived or completed are the indicators that are going to roll up to verify whether or not an entire checklist has been completed for all the items that are required by that. And when you talk about a checklist being completed, when you look at a property or a deal and you see your list checklists, it'll have a status for the actual checklist, and it'll be incomplete or complete. Dates can be entered after you click into the checklist item or entering a date in the items grid, which we talked about earlier, and it will get a completed date equal to the date that the last required item is completed or waived. So with our checklist, you can have, for example, we have one checklist here, like an intake application checklist. There's a total of 56 items on that checklist, but only 27 are required. So as long as the 27 required items are complete, and they have a completed date or a waive date, but they've been addressed, that checklist is going to show as complete on the list screen. This is something that is also covered in help text, and we'll give you a a link to that or how to get to the help text if you're not aware when we're done with our PowerPoint. So we also, to get to your checklist in any of these areas, whether it be a dev deal or a TC deal or anything of that nature, you will just go to what we call the selected record panel, which could be a dev deal panel, a selected deal panel. It could be your selected property panel, your selected supportive service panel. And when you scroll down in the items available, checklist is going to be down here at the bottom around files and assigned users. And once you've clicked that checklist item, you'll be directed to the list checklist screen. If you want to create a new one, you can. And once you've, I'm sorry, I have a duplicate slide that always trips me up when I do that. After you click new and you go to the edit checklist screen, this is where you have your title that is required in your description, right? You save the checklist. And like I said, I'm going to kind of breeze through this a little bit, the how-tos, because from a ProLink perspective, it's rather rudimentary. It's simple. And if you know how ProLink works, it shouldn't be too difficult, because I want to show you that real world scenario. Once you've created the checklist, you just add your checklist item. And when you do that, you're going to have to enter the name, because that's your required field. You don't have to put a due date. If you don't put a due date on it, it's just not going to have a due date. Then you can track things on whether or not it's been completed or not. If it's required, you want to select that it is required. And then you can save your checklist item, or you can hit save and return or save and new. Save and new will allow you to continue to create those checklist items. So you can create, if you have your little list and you want to create them one by one. We can also create checklists using Smart Docs. And if that's something that you're interested in doing, let me know. We can spend some time together looking at how setting up a template to be able to automatically add those in various places if you need to do that. So checklist templates. This is a little different, but some of it is the same as just adding a checklist randomly on any kind of record. This is going to live in admin, in your admin panel. So only people who have access to your admin panel and the ability to add, modify, and delete checklist templates should be able to access this area. And this is kind of you would use a checklist template if you have a checklist that is repeatable for pretty much every scenario that you might have during the life cycle of what you're doing as an agency. For example, having an onboarding checklist when you are done with construction and you've issued 8609s and you're ready to onboard your property. Once you get to the point where you're doing that, you can create a checklist template to automatically update the property, be added to that, and that will allow whoever's assigned, possibly the asset manager to the property, to go through and make sure that everything that should be taken care of during onboarding is completed. So that's done. You can repeat these templates. That's why these are different than just a checklist you would create on a property or a deal. You can create this in admin, and then you can attach it with a workflow, or you can pull it in on a deal by deal basis if you prefer. So once you go into the checklist templates menu item in admin, you'll get the list checklist. That's really hard. I want everybody to practice saying checklist template 5 times fast. But once you get to this screen, you can modify existing templates, or you can create your new checklist template. And so a question that has been asked in previous trainings is, when you modify a checklist template and you have a deal or a property that is currently using it, anything updates you make on the checklist template page, it's not going to filter down and update templates that have already been added somewhere. Those are static. If you make a change on any template, that will be reflected going forward when that is added to a deal or property. It does not dynamically update retroactively or anything of that nature. So that's just kind of a hot tip to remember. And creating your checklist template is very similar to creating just a normal checklist, except this is going to be repeatable throughout the system. Again, title, default sort order is active, the description. We kind of talked about this briefly, but these are the same things on a template that you would do for a checklist as well. Save it once you have your title in here. You can edit the title later if you need to have a committee to talk about what you want to specifically call this template for whatever reason. And then again, once you've entered your title and saved it, at that point, you'll have the option to add a checklist item, because it's not going to, until you save that record, you're not going to have the ability to add your checklist item. So checklist items, very similar to a normal checklist item on a just ad hoc checklist, but we have a few other fields. The is required is the box you're going to check that verifies that in order for the entire parent checklist to be complete, this checklist item is going to have to be completed. It's either going to have a completed date or it's going to have a waived date. And the sort order is going to show what order it is as a checklist item. And the days until due is where the magic time and date math come into play. If you know that you want this checklist completed within 7 days of attaching that to a deal or a property, you want to put in this days until due. And what that's going to do is, let's say that I add this particular checklist, imagine if you will, to a property right now. And I add that, what that's going to do, it's going to update all the due dates for the checklist items on this template to 7 days for today, which would be October 11th. So that's going to automatically mark the due date 7 days past the current date that you have added this checklist template to a record. After running all the information, you can save it. And this is where I pointed out a little early because I was excited. Changes to template items and the template are only going to apply to new checklists created from the template. Existing checklists will not be updated when the template is updated. So then once you have got a template, if you want to add it manually, you can navigate to the object you want to create a checklist on. You would click checklist. It's going to be available to pull in to your property or your deal as a template. Because once you have clicked on list checklist in a deal or a property and you get the list checklist screen, you're going to have a new or a new from template. And when you're pulling in that checklist that you've created in admin, you're going to click new from template. That's going to bring up a modal that's going to allow you to find which checklist template you want to add. And in this example, I've kind of used steps for onboarding as an example with very few steps, just to as an example for you to see. You can select one or more to add, and you would just hit add selected and close after you found the checklist that you want to find. And again, only active checklist templates are going to show up in this modal. It's going to add that, and you're going to see that it was created on the template you selected. It's going to show you the created date. If you click into the checklist you just created, you can make some updates, but you won't be able to update the checklist item names or if the item is required. And any changes that you make will not affect the template. It's just going to affect what this has on your particular deal or property. So when you're creating a new checklist template, you can copy from an existing template to save time. Let's say, for example, you want to no longer use a 2022 template with checklist items for, say, onboarding or something of that nature. You can just copy a checklist, and if you have new steps for a new process you're implementing in the next year, you can just update it, and then you can delete or add checklist items to make that viable for the next year and any new processes or items that you have implemented at that point. So summary of templates, these are going to allow you to standardize tasks across your organization. You find the templates on the admin menu. You can modify checklists created from a template, but not the names or whether or not it's required. And updates to checklist templates will only apply to checklists created going forward, not retroactively. So checklist reporting with data views. We have checklists and checklist items that are available under most of these modules or top level records. If it has a checklist, it's going to have a data view. This is going to allow you to look at all the checklists across the portfolio. You can filter and search by property. If you're familiar with data views, then you kind of understand what you could do to pull in all that data, see what's due, what's not due, find out who might be, like if you have an asset manager on the property that is responsible for completing these items or verifying that they are completed, you can filter by an asset manager if you want to. We can also, as most of you know who have attended these webinars this year and any of our training, we have new custom data views. And that's something we could probably implement with checklists and checklist items to make things a little more customizable for what you might need to see when it comes to these items. The checklist will just show the high level. The checklist data view just shows the high level information for the checklist, like, is it complete? How many items does it have? How many required items are in there? So that's just a very high level view of the checklist itself, but we also have the checklist item data view that's going to allow you to look at the specific item for each checklist, to look at those dates and see when they're due and if they're required. So that's going to break out the checklist in more granular form for the checklist items. And when you're in a data view and you click on one of these rows, it will take you to the checklist item for the screen if you need to take a look at it, or you've decided you're impatient, you're just going to complete it and move on because you've got to get that off your plate. All these things have to be done. Checklist and workflows. I'm wondering how many people we have in attendance where workflow is a new word for them. So let's talk a little bit about that. If you have a specific checklist that you want to add to, let's say, once you've created a deal or a property, like, the minute you create a blended deal that you want to add this checklist to that, you can set up a workflow that's going to do that. Basically, when a deal is created, we're going to attach this checklist template. And so that's going to be the starting point for everything that needs to be done at a certain, stage or phase of the deal life cycle. If you want to add a checklist to every property, you can set up the workflow to evaluate when the property is created. And then once you do that, you can click the checklist templates to add which template you want to do. You can add more than one with one workflow if you want to. If you have 5 different workflows that are going to be required by 5 different members of your deal team or your construction team or whatnot, you can add all those in one action on a deal or a property if needed. So here's an example of setting up a workflow to evaluate checklist items when they are overdue. And this is after you have added a template to a deal or a property, the checklist is there, the due dates, the clock's ticking because it's due in a certain amount of days. You can create a workflow to find out if there's a due date, within the next 7 days, and you want to kind of give someone a nudge saying, hey, you haven't filled this out yet and it's due. We can set up checklist item workflows to be sent to a deal team member. If you have someone with an activity role of asset manager on your property, or the example we're going to use here in a minute is going to be your tax control officer on the TC deal portion, and let them know, send them an email and say, hey, this due date's coming up, or this is overdue. And I'm going to overview how we're going to do that as well. Let's say you want to notify underwriting the intake steps have been completed. So let's say that you have a checklist that is deal intake steps, and the completed date is modified, and that means it's been completed. You can set up a workflow that will generate an email to someone at underwriting saying, we've done all the deal intake things that we needed to do. Now it's your turn. So you can go do whatever you need to do, whatever responsibilities your agency is indicating that you need to complete there. So now that I've talked ad nauseum about our checklist functionality, and I apologize, I came into this assuming a certain level of familiarity with our system, and that most of you do know how to go in and create records and etc. If that is not the case and you want to discuss things more specifically, please reach out to me or put in a ticket at support@prolinksolutions.com. We can set up some time to kind of slow this down. And as most of you know, I'll let you drive and I'll backseat drive, and we'll kind of go through this together to see how to set it up. So the example that I want to show you today comes from our ongoing attempts to improve our HUD reporting training. And I know that we've talked about there are certain values at the TC deal level that need to be populated, need to be completed in order for your HUD uploads to be successful. Otherwise, it's going to say you're missing this and you're missing that. So in the spirit of that, I created for our demo an example of setting up a checklist template specifically to make sure some of the data on a TC deal is filled out once that TCA deal has gone to the stage of 8609 app feasibility, which anybody who's worked with HUD export hopefully remembers that in order for your TC data to be exported correctly, the TCA portion of the deal tied to a property with an active LIHTC program needs to be in 8609 app feasibility, or that's just not going to show up in your export, which is just a side note of another training. But so you can see here that I've talked about the TCA deal transition to asset management. And these are the 3 items I have put in this checklist. Make sure the HUD ID and HUD PIN are updated on the deal, verify total units and number of low-income units, and verify each TCA building has a BIN and address. And these may not be all the steps, but this was just kind of my work in progress. This could be a good idea. I know some people who might like to use this. So what I've done is I've gone into ProLinkHFA, and now I'm going to bring up our screen over here and talk about where we've done this. Hopefully you can see this as well. And this is the checklist that I created. You'll see here that I'm an admin. Let me make that a little bigger. I'm over here in admin. I clicked on checklist templates, and this is the update HUD data for TCA deal checklist template that I've completed. And you'll note that it is active, and I created it just a few days ago. And these are the items that I have on it. I've made it active. All of these checklist items are required. So that's step 1, and being able to do the create the checklist, verify it gets attached to a deal, and then verify those items have been completed and or waived. So this is step 1, is creating the checklist template. So once that's done, you want to create a workflow that's going to generate when the TCA deal is advanced to 8609 app visibility. So that's what I have done here. And it's a pretty simple, just, hey, when the property stage sort order is equal to 1, and that's just kind of a pick list ID. That 1 stands for 8609 app feasibility. And because when you advance a TCA deal to the very last stage, which is 8609 app feasibility, it automatically sets that status to under review. So this is telling the workflow, hey, when someone advances a stage and it's got under review in the status and it's an 8609 app feasibility, we want this to trigger. And what I've done is I've added the checklist template that I showed you earlier, update HUD data for TCA deal. I've added that to the template for this workflow. So that's going to be automatically attached to that TCA deal when it gets advanced to 8609 because of the workflow that we've set up here. And then it's going to send whoever's assigned to that deal as a tax credit officer or tax credit activity role, they're going to get this specific email that says, hey, this deal is advanced. You need to update the HUD fields. And it's like, please review this checklist. You can check include application link, and that's going to take them directly to the tax credit deal. At that point, they can go to the checklist and see what they need to do. So what's going to happen is when the TCA deal gets advanced, this is going to automatically be added with a due date because we have defined the due date as a certain amount of days that it needs to be due once it's attached to this deal. So this is what we're going to do live. We're going to watch the magic happen over here. So this is the checklist template, just so you know, and I'm making it up. There's no sleight of hand. We're really doing this. The checklist template that I have set up. And then we have the workflow that I set up specifically for this. I'm just making sure it's still active because it would be very disappointing if the email didn't generate after I've been all excited about showing you this. That would be a sad thing. It's event triggered, same things that I showed you. This is going to get sent to me. You know, when I test workflows, I always put myself on it to make sure I get it. So I try not to bombard other people with emails while we're testing and setting these things up. And so I have a deal over here that is currently in 8609 app stage, which in a perfect world, you're going to go through and advance these stages as you're supposed to. Once you get to 8609 app feasibility, this is when we're ready to generate the 8609s. And that's what logically would come next in most situations with LIHTC and LIHTC reporting. But you can see here that we don't have a checklist. And when I click in here, we don't have a checklist because I haven't gone to the stage that I need to in order to get the workflow to attach this checklist here. So no checklist. Now I'm going to go back to edit deal. Pardon me while I have a sip of water. And I'm going to advance stage. And so once I advance the stage, it's going to run that workflow behind the scenes, under the hood, whatever you want to call it. And then it's going to attach that checklist. So now you can see that the checklist has been attached. What I also had is a email. I have a separate email. Oh, this actually comes with it. My bad. This shows that this particular deal has been advanced and there's a checklist, and this sent it to me. It also sent it to the tax control person on the deal, who's Andrea O'Brien, who hopefully knows that she's not supposed to do anything with this. And then when I click on, whoops, when I click over here, it's going to take me to the deal overview for this deal, which we were kind of already on there. So that kind of shows you how you can get a checklist attached when you have certain things that you want to get populated for various reasons. And there could be a lot of reasons you have for your reporting. You want to make sure everybody's filling out these certain fields on reporting that are necessary for whatever it is that you need to report on from a data view or for one of your reports or for everybody's favorite HUD export. So let me pop back into our PowerPoint. This is the email, very similar. I just generated that. So then, in partner with kind of what we're talking about using checklist and workflow, you can create a workflow to notify that a tax control assigned user or any user has checklist items that are overdue. And so I have kind of set this up as checklist items overdue. Your associated object is going to be a checklist item. And then all the other objects are going to fall under that, whether it's TCA, deal. I know there's been some struggles for some people that are like using the dev deal or the property as your top level object. For checklist items, a checklist item has to be the associated object. And when you look down in your criteria, at that point, you're going to be able to bring in the parent TC deal or the parent dev deal or the parent property. In the criteria is where you're going to find that. And so if you have more than one item that is on a checklist that's overdue, you can do a send digest, which will send, all the checklist items in one email. So it's just, okay, we have all these checklist items for one checklist. I'm not going to send this user 6 emails. We're going to just kind of put it into one. That's the idea behind the digest. Another thing that if you want to talk about and go through that functionality, you can let me know and we can spend some time together doing that. So once we've done that, and you've got your checklist items out there, you have them assigned to things, you can create data views to track and review checklists and checklist items. And since I've been very specific to this scenario with making sure that you have HUD data that's been completed, if you just want to see if anything's been completed or any checklist, you can kind of look by deal, you can pull in the checklist name. Like this particular data view, I specifically created to look for this checklist. And I just want to bring in items with this checklist name, and I want to group that by my TC deal name. That's what I've done here. And so then you can see that none of these things have been completed. And that person, because we set up a workflow, was not only notified that, hey, there's a checklist available, you need to complete these tasks, but then, hey, you haven't done it yet. Could you please go ahead and do that? Which is, I need that reminder. I'm thinking, I don't know if Bree would let me use ProLink to do my fall cleaning schedule and checklist items, but hey, at least I know I'd get an email reminder about it. And that would increase the chances of things getting done in a timely manner in my real life. So that is a very high level and quick overview of one scenario that you can use to use checklists, checklist items, and workflows in a couple of different ways. If you want to implement this into your process, there's a little setup time and a little testing to make sure that you have everything. But once it works pretty great. Once the emails are generating, you have everybody on the same page. They know they need to do this. You have whoever's kind of in control of making sure things are completed. They're able to use data views to track and find out who's not finishing their checklist. It's kind of, telling on, oh, okay, well, so-and-so didn't, this asset manager hasn't done this, and this tax credit officer hasn't done this, which I don't think normal ProLink users are going to like that, but I think, the managers in the departments will very much appreciate being able to track what's done, what's been completed, and what hasn't been. So, as most of you do know, if you want to view a lot of the information that we've talked about during this webinar, you can go to the help text. And from any screen in ProLink HFA, you should know by now that we have this nifty little question mark icon, and that's going to take you to help text where you can search and look for those things. If you're on the checklist screen, it should kind of take you to like a checklist, or if you're on the checklist in admin for checklist templates, it will take you there. I'm going to just bring this up real quick and we can talk about what that looks like. I know not everybody remembers the ways we can search and help when we need to find something. But if I'm over here on a checklist and for some reason I need to go in here and I want to look at the template because but I'm not there, you can look at all the help text. It's going to take you to information about checklists. When you look over here, it's going to show checklist related data views and any other additional items you can look at that when you expand and contract. And let's say I just want to look for template. You would type in your search over here, which hopefully you can still see my screen. Yep. Good, because Teams always lets me know. Zoom isn't so great about that. But here's an example. It's brought up these things that meet these. If I want to view a checklist template or create a checklist template, just by searching on the keyword template, I can bring up the checklist template screen and find more information in there about that. And like what privs are required, et cetera, et cetera.
Thanks, Sara.
So yeah, I think that's all we have. And Bree, I'll just hand it back to you so you can go ahead and steal the screen back.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to just finish up here on the same slide that Sara just ended on for us. Thank you, Sara. And it's good to review. We don't always cover help, the help center and help documentation that we offer in ProLinkHFA with every session we do. So thank you for that. Just to wrap us up, appreciate the extra time. I know we're a little bit over today, but I thought this was well worth covering and didn't want to interrupt Sara during that. So thank you for holding on with us through the end of this presentation. Please go ahead and register. We have ProLink Tech Live now coming November 7th and 8th, as I mentioned before, our user group conference. We have a number of panels that we're going to be offering, one on average income test, one on Budget Pro. Stockton Williams, Executive Director of NCSHA, is going to be our keynote speaker, kicking us off at, I think, 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, November 7th. And I think it's a total of 8 sessions that we're going to be hosting for trainings and panels and, those kinds of things over those 2 days. So please register for that event. We look forward to seeing you there. We're going to follow up for any registrants on this webinar with the slide materials that Sara covered, the recording, and then the link to register for this conference. Appreciate your attendance today and through the rest of this year so far as we've hosted these events. We really do appreciate it. Please contact us if we can cover anything else for you in the future. And we'll see you soon. Thank you.